Hey, welcome to the Stargazy Brief. Today we are talking with Dean Shu, the CEO of Arphie. He comes to us with a really unique background. He has been an SME, a product manager who has responded to RFPs within software companies his whole career. But he gives us a breakdown of how to work with an SME when you're responding to RFPs to make it more likely that they're going to help you respond. The second thing he goes through is how to work with your content library. It's not what you think, and it's really not what we've talked about in the podcast before. I can't wait for you to hear this podcast. Let's dive in. Hey, Dean, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for being on the Stargazy Brief. I feel like what you're doing is incredibly innovative in our space, and getting to know a little bit about yourself and your company, Arphie, the companies and teams that you work with, so we can frame things and understand where you're coming from when you're talking about proposal management.
So for us, we primarily focus on using AI agents to help B2B SaaS companies. So these are primarily large publicly traded ones or high growth private ones to help really streamline the RFP and proposal process. And that's where we've invested a lot of time and engineering effort. Publicly traded firms also really need audit trails and explainable AI for risk management. A lot of these teams that we work with are very cross functional. There's teams like product and security and engineering that get looped in to help with many of these questions. And so there's a lot of really robust collaboration features and translation features that we ended up developing to support this audience quite well. So again, our focus really is on these B2B SaaS companies, publicly traded, high growth, and many of the times the teams that we work with, some of them are proposal teams, but many times they're also sales engineering, pre-sales, solutions consulting teams as well.
Yeah, no, that makes me so excited to talk to you because that's my background. So selfishly, this is like a conversation I love to have, and just seeing all the changes that are happening in this space right now, because there are so many new ones. And I think one of the biggest changes that we're seeing right now is in terms of buyers, right? Like how people are buying software is different fundamentally than how it used to be just a couple of years ago. So do you think that proposal teams, pre-sales teams need to do anything differently now to resonate with today's evaluators to win these RFPs?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to making sure that the responses and the approach is very tailored to the opportunity. So I think that the rule of thumb is if you're able to just swap the name of the buyer or the prospect to a different one in your response, then it means that the proposal is too generic. And so decision makers today on the buyer side, they're just really flooded with information. They're not looking for more words. They actually want clear reasoning and why your proposal and approach is the one to choose. And so in 2025, proposals really need to cut through the noise with clarity, logic, good evidence of understanding. It's not just about the polish of language, because with AI, that becomes table stakes. So evaluators also really expect proposals to read very much like an intelligent dialogue. And not just as a generic brochure that someone's going to give you. And so that tailoring can happen using a combination of technology and human guidance, but ultimately that real personalization means adapting the argument structure and value logic directly to the evaluator's main priorities, risk appetite, industry context, understanding what is their existing solution, why your solution is a better approach. And in our opinion, AI can finally make that scalable, right? So when it understands why something matters to the buyer, it's not just what they ask, but being able to incorporate that why as well.
So essentially, to really get your buyer's attention, your evaluator's attention, it is to make everything as clear and as personalized as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like proposal people have always known this, but it's like you're saying, is doing that at scale, right? Like that's where it gets difficult because it can take a lot of time, especially like in the past before we had AI to do a lot of this research and writing for us, that research and personalization was tough to do. So that brings me up to my next question, which is about AI, because it's hard to have a conversation about proposals without AI right now. We all know AI, it can do that first draft of writing, of course. It can summarize, it can automate a few things, which is great. But from your perspective, what's the real, true, exciting breakthrough that AI actually changes for proposal teams versus what's overrated?
Yeah. So I'll actually start with the second one. I think fundamentally what is overrated with AI is just trying to use it as like bolt on for everything, because if all
Yeah.
you have is a hammer, everything kind of starts looking like a nail, right? So The key here is really just finding the right cases where AI adds a lot of value, and it's like you're not spending time correcting things that AI is doing. So I think ultimately what AI for proposals should not be is just fancy autocomplete, right? It's not just about fast text generation without real understanding. In those cases, you end up with first drafts that are very fast, but then it just creates a lot more downstream work checking for accuracy, consistency, compliance. And over time, that just erodes trust. Teams stop relying on it, they revert back to manual review. And so the automation piece is not the breakthrough of AI, it's really just around the intelligence aspect. And what I mean by that is it's this combination of reasoning and explainability. So you want AI that can actually reason and not just regurgitate and write responses. And it means understanding why an answer is correct, what's the evidence that it has to support it, and how it connects that information to company information, company background, product logic. And so it turns the AI from a guessing machine into a collaborative expert assistant that you can work with and collaborate together. And so you shift from fact checking the AI and kind of cleaning up after it into collaborating with it instead. And it just becomes a trusted partner, showing its logic, its confidence, its sources, and it reduces the risk and improves the consistency. And so to your point, Chris, around how do you do this at scale, this is where we kind of see the impact of AI really providing a very measurable impact where you can reduce times end to end from the very beginning all the way to your submission period by 60 to 80% without sacrificing quality and your shortlist and win rate. So overall, the takeaway is what I would say is overrated AI that just writes like a human. And what's actually really transformative is AI that can think very transparently, reasons very accurately, and earns the trust of the people that use it.
Yeah, what is that latest news thing about Deloitte? They were fined a ridiculous amount of money because they were using AI like that, right? The report sounded beautiful, but it was all made up. It wasn't accurate. Using AI that can reason, um, that is going to mitigate your risk so much as opposed to one that just can write well, but it's not real. And of course, there's the saying of, garbage in, garbage out with AI. And so, of course, we want to be feeding our proposal tech tools the best content that we possibly can. And so, I'm wondering what you're thinking about libraries right now versus how
Mm.
they were like a couple years ago, because this is huge for most of us. Like what the differences and changes we need to be making now to have a better output.
Yeah. So this is effectively, if I were to play that back to you, the question is really just around proposal teams have spent a lot of time with this paradigm of building up these large Q&A libraries. I think it really comes down to whether teams are already existing, have a lot of existing cleanliness and happiness with the way that they've organized their library. Because ultimately, what we believe is that teams should have the flexibility to work however they prefer without being dictated to have to work a certain way due to technological limitations or preference, right? I know there's some platforms that say we connect directly to the sources. You have that's the primary source. Don't do Q&A library because the information there is up to date. That can work great for some teams. We also work with other teams that say I want to have a really small, slimmed down, portable library that makes it really easy to maintain because in certain cases there's answers that we want to keep consistent and we don't want the AI to rewrite, and that's totally fine. But there's also, on the flip side, a lot of teams, to our earlier discussion, like, they're not thrilled with their Q&A library and they see migration as a really good opportunity to start fresh or at least slim down the library. So again, that's a very common approach that we see as well. And teams often don't trust what's in the library. They realize that they spend more time searching, verifying, writing it than actually using it. And so the real irony there is what started as a knowledge asset, it actually turns into knowledge debt. And
Yeah.
a good example would be Commerce Tools. One of our customers, they're a $2 billion company, and they switched over to us, and they saw it as a really good opportunity to say, I want to take my corpus of Q&A libraries because it was already very out of date, hard to maintain. They cut it down to about a fourth of what it was before, and then they supplement it with their online product documentation, their internal Confluence pages. I would say my philosophy is we really want to meet teams where they prefer and where they work best, and so we don't want to be overly uh, paternalistic or dictate like this is what you have to do.
Is there like a specific type of team that prefers like the Q&A hardly change my answer structure versus the ones that are like, you know what? Let's use this as an excuse to completely change what we're doing.
Yeah. So I actually think the fast moving B2B software teams, they do very much prefer the live connector approach. And the
Mm,
reason for that is because their product and engineering teams are shipping updates and improvements and new features so quickly that it's really hard to keep up with a very static Q&A library approach. And so in those cases, if they already have dedicated teams that are updating documentation on their website, there's dedicated product marketing teams that are updating materials as new launches go out. Those are the cases where that live connection matter the most. And so there's also some teams that say, well, our product releases happen on an annual basis. We want a lot of control over the way that we describe certain things. We don't want to leave it up to the AI. Those cases, they do lean more towards the Q&A library. I would say that's kind of the main driver. But then there's also a subsegment within that, which is around the content type. So especially for security, compliance, and company overview related questions, those tend to not change that much over time. And people generally have a preference to keep those answers verbatim to keep the various teams that are owning that content happy. And
I
so
love,
we do
yeah.
work with a lot of teams that say that's the content that we're going to put in the Q&A library, but for product functionality, capabilities, support model, all that type of information that does tend to evolve a lot over time, let's connect to live resources instead.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if it's proposal people versus solution consultants who might have a different way of doing things. Like, have you seen a difference in that split at all? Or
Yeah, I will say that I think proposal managers, because they are dedicated day in day out working on these RFPs and proposals, they tend to know the Q&A library like the back of their hand. So they'll say, I know exactly what phrase or what terms to search for in the library. And so I think those teams tend to really like the concept of the Q&A library because they, again, are working in it pretty constantly. Whereas the solutions teams completing RFPs is just a portion of what they do. They instead like to lean on the live connectors approach instead because they may not know that Q&A library as deeply.
I also see a lot of sales leaders, and I do mean leaders, usually people who aren't in the day to day work of RFPs, who think that they can just use AI for everything. Like it's almost a magic button that fixes all RFP problems. And I'm curious what you see in terms of the wrong expectations these people have with AI. Like what's real, what should they expect, and what shouldn't they expect at this moment with RFPs?
So just to set a baseline, if we talk to a sales leader that frames AI to us in that way, or talks about it as a way even to trim their proposal or SE team in confidence, we will first try to educate them on what AI is great at and not great at. And then if we can't get through, we actually just we're in a very fortunate position where we'll just tell them like we won't deliver what they're looking for and it's not a good fit to partner together. And I think the best way to think about it is that AI is a smart intern that is good at following directions, but the human element is so important in determining how to approach the opportunity strategically, how to lay the groundwork around the RFP, etc. The Steve Jobs quote is around how the computer is like a bicycle for the mind, right? And I think the best way to think about it is AI is almost like a race car for the mind, but you still need the mind in order to tell the race car what to do. And there's definitely AI that will help with this process where storytelling and tailoring to the prospect will assist with this, right? Like we have a capability around taking project information from discovery notes, from RFP context, from additional Q&A that you have with the prospect and inject that into the responses in a way that can help provide more storytelling and persuasiveness, but it does ultimately come down to the proposal manager or the SE that's working on the opportunity to ensure that it does do a fantastic job at communicating the value and why your solution is the right solution to pick. And so, again, it really does come down to giving the AI intern the right information to work with. We talked about the knowledge base. We talked about the live research resources, but that's also obviously a key component here as well. The race car can't do anything if it doesn't have fuel. So fundamentally, it really does come down to education and reframing the way that they think about this as opposed to like some sort of labor arbitrage, which we're very quick to correct.
Yeah. So what would you suggest to, the SE or the proposal people who are maybe worried about this a little bit? Like what conversations should they be having with their leaders or what data should they be bringing to their leaders that would be useful for them to maybe get rid of some of these misconceptions or help kind of drive that conversation?
Yeah, I think the key is actually coming about this with a very open mind and explaining and doing the research around what AI is really good at and what AI is not good at, right? So having a very balanced and nuanced way of thinking about it, as opposed to, I can definitely understand the human instinct to say, okay, I'm worried about this. So let me give the leaders all this evidence about why AI is bad. These are all the failure cases. This is why it doesn't work. But then, if anything, I think some leaders can respond to that in a way that says, okay, like, I don't actually really believe you because you're only giving me the negative view. And I'm seeing and hearing from all of my peers about how AI is very helpful. So I think the key here is actually just taking a very balanced view and specific to your particular processes and workflows, think through what are the processes where AI actually can be helpful? Where are the processes and parts where AI is less helpful? And then being able to present that in that type of view. And I actually see it as another benefit where many times teams have to fight to get budget for tooling and AI capabilities. But if you present that view, you have two benefits. One is you're able to lay out clearly what is the benefit of investing in AI solutions or other software solutions that you're really hoping to bring in. Great for you. And at the same time, you're also explaining what are the cases where AI actually can't really help that well. And so having that balanced view, I think, is ultimately what sales leaders, from what we see, really value, as opposed to their team telling us, hey, like, no, 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 it can't be done. It's that really balanced view that's helpful and ultimately very persuasive to leaders.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of people listening to this podcast, because I think Stargazy just has kind of a bias in itself, and that people who listen are going to have already embraced AI, and so they really want to know how to use it best and just make sure they're going down the right path as they're changing up their processes, changing how they're bidding. And I think what you're saying is, if you are that person, bring up to your sales leaders, whoever would be making those decisions. Um, exactly where you think AI would help in that process and the ROI, and where it would help within that process to hopefully get budget for that. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. But also the flip side as well, where you can also present a very pragmatic understanding of these are the places in our process where we believe that AI can't help us today in our particular context. And that's totally fine. We're going to continue to explore and keep an eye on that. Having that flip view is also really helpful for people to understand there are boundaries and edge cases today where AI was not going to be as effective.
Yeah, when you have these conversations with, with the marketing and sales leaders, are there specific KPIs that they are looking at that could be really useful for proposal and pre-sales people to bring to them to show like, hey, here's what it's going to help with, here's what it's not going to help with, but we're going to still be working towards those KPIs.
Yeah. I think there's the high level KPIs, which should be no surprise to anyone, which is around your shortlist rate and win rate and just total number of volume of proposals that are flowing through. Also around what are the proposals and RFPs that the team is currently leaving on the table due to capacity and time constraints. And if there were enablers that allowed you to go after those additional opportunities, what would that look like? Sales and marketing leaders, ultimately, what they care a lot about is top line growth.
Going with those optimizations, of course, that means we do need to then change our proposal playbook. Like, what does that look like? And I'm wondering if there's something that proposal people should really be taking a look at in their proposal process that you're seeing over and over again that maybe we should take out or change now that maybe we can. Makes sense.
I guess, yeah, no, it
Don't
does.
say
I
burn it
was
to the ground because I tell people that and they say I can't. It's too hard.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, I mean, maybe if you're using a legacy tool today, like take a hard look at that, see if that's something that you should
Yeah.
stop doing. But jokes aside, I think it really is doing the audit because every team is a little bit different. Like I had mentioned earlier, we do work with quite different teams. Like sometimes it's a dedicated proposal team, sometimes it's SE teams where proposals and RFPs are just a portion of the work that they do.
Right.
And so it does come down to doing that time audit, figuring out where people are spending the most time. But particularly for proposal managers, I think one thing that we keep hearing time and time again before they switch to Arphie is they spend a lot of time on two things that I think are quite painful, but also quite solvable. One is getting very complicated RFP formats into their software. That's something that we've then taken that thought and said, what are all the ways that we can apply AI and make that really easy? So I think that's one thing that we've put a lot of thought into. And I think another piece that people also surprisingly spend a lot of time on, or maybe not surprisingly, is maintaining their content library. And I think that's also where there is a lot of benefit to exploring the new solutions that are out.
Yeah, Dean, I think a lot of people are trying to look at that playbook, like do that audit of the playbook and seeing where they can focus. And you're saying the content, you're saying just where AI can help with any little bit that it can, of course, to save time and be more strategic. But I'm wondering if there is one really specific piece that jumps out at you every single time you say, like, look, if you're in proposals, look at this part right now.
I do feel like there isn't like a one
No.
brush fits all because
Yeah.
in our case, again, like we do work with so many different varied teams.
Right.
But I do think the one piece of advice or feedback that we always give folks is like, how can you ensure that the knowledge and content is as up to date and as accurate as possible? And that's why that is kind of the first thing that we cover for every single one of our onboarding, because we want to understand where the knowledge lives today and take a really good hard look at that, whether it's a mix of the Q&A library or connected resources, but just understanding where that information lives and how it's updated, because ultimately that is going to be the fuel for the race car. And so that's something that I think is worthwhile to audit on a quarterly basis to say, is this still working for us? Has there been other new sources that are added that would be better or more effective to connect to? And that's really the key, I think, that everyone should think through, because that is what will drive your answer quality. That is what will drive how much time you're able to save in terms of getting that first route.
So we also have quite a few people who like they know they want to do this. They want to do this audit with their process. But at the same time, even when you want to do that audit with your process, RFPs don't slow down. People are getting more RFPs than they ever have before. There's more revenue percentage tied to RFPs than ever before, which means more pressure and usually less headcount. So it's really hard to spend that time auditing your process or changing your process. Do you have any advice for teams that really want to do this but are super short on time?
Yeah. So it's actually super common, to your point, for all these different pressures that you're describing. And it's by no means the fault of the folks working on these proposals and RFPs, right? They're under immense pressure. As you pointed out, more RFPs, tighter deadlines, fewer people. And it feels impossible to overhaul these processes if you're stuck in a firefighting cycle.
Yeah.
And I think my two pieces of advice here, one is typically RFP seasons will be in ebbs and flows. I think I one of our customers described this as like sometimes we're jogging and sometimes we're sprinting, but like there's always some movement.
Yeah.
In the times where things are a little bit less busy, just be really intentional in setting time aside to think through what are the workflows you and the team are spending on the most time on, and then work backwards to figure out what are some ways to solve it. It could be a process thing, it could be a technology thing, and as a tech person, I'll just say it's not always a technology thing, right? Many times it could also be process improvements as well.
Yeah.
And the key here is to make iterative improvements, not necessarily like a big bang overhaul, because instead of trying to redesign the entire process, starting with incremental changes and quick wins, that's how you can multiply the efforts on giving yourself back more and more time to continue to dedicate more effort to this. And so it's also really important to help make the internal business case of why this is valuable. So to your point, it's RFPs are driving more and more as a percentage of revenue. We spend X amount of time on it. And overall, like having that type of business case also helps justify spending time on it as well. And then for the second piece, if it is a technology improvement that can be made, my advice is to really work with a team that has a track record of supporting teams when times are tough, right? So that means white glove support, being in constant contact, going above and beyond when questions or issues arise. And the way that you can test for that is ask for references, look at case studies. Do the companies that the team work with look similar to us? And it really does come down to building trust with whoever you're working with to ensure that they'll support you even when times are really tough. And ultimately, it's just you don't have to fix everything at once. Just focus on leverage, trust, reasoning, and use tools and processes that reduce friction.
Yeah, absolutely. Your background is in you were a solution consultant. Is that
Yeah.
am I
So
right?
combination solution consultant and product management.
Yeah, and so a lot of the people listening to this podcast don't have that same background, but some of them are in proposals, have never worked in pre-sales. What is something that you wish proposal people knew when they were working with solution consultants when they're responding to RFPs? And also, what's one of the best ways that we can be working with teams like yours to make sure that we're working well together when we are responding? Yeah.
I would say I think it kind of comes down to two things. I think one is being able to ideally package things up in a way that it makes it really easy to understand what is the input that's required and when you need that input by.
Okay.
So, depending on your processes, if you don't have software today, that probably just means being very clear about that in the Slack message or Teams message or the email that you send to them. Two is if you have software, just make sure that it's one that will clearly tell you like what are the questions that are being assigned. That view is really obvious, and then having the ability to comment back and forth and tag each other. I would say that's one piece, right? Because ultimately, subject matter experts are not out there to try to make your life hard. The main crux of it is that they're also busy with their day job as well. And
Yeah.
so how can you make it really easy for them to provide their input in a format that is that's also easy to provide as well. And so that's kind of the main advice I would give for that first portion. And then for the second portion, I would say it also really helps in terms of the knowledge management aspect. So separate from soliciting ad hoc input on a given proposal. But knowledge management, I think, is another key portion as well, where a lot of proposal teams, they do rely on subject matter experts to provide input. And I think that's where the live connectors can be quite helpful because if, let's say, the solutions engineering or sales engineering team is already keeping that content in a Confluence page, asking them to double update that in a Q&A library is just, in my opinion, I think it's just not a fair request,
No, I agree.
especially now that we are in a world that has AI capabilities that can connect to live resources. So I think that's another key aspect as well of like, okay, what are the places where AI tooling and AI software can be helpful to reduce that double work burden. So it's both portions, both the project completion aspect of it as well as the knowledge base management maintaining of it as well.
If people are wanting to learn about Arphie, maybe their contract is about to be up with their current provider, or they just want to get a new proposal tech software that does all these cool things you talked about. Where can they find you and where can they find Arphie?
Yeah. So if they reach out to us at hello@arphi.ai, there will be someone there to ensure that we can talk through both what is optimal for them, as well as share a little bit more about Arphi. I think the thing about us is that we actually don't have salespeople. So we instead take the approach to be very consultative to understand what their problem is and whether Arphi is something that can do a good job to solve the issues that they're facing. We are former solutions consultants, and so we want to optimize for what works best for you. And I think the approach that we take is we ultimately want to ensure that everyone is able to reap the benefits of AI, whether it's using Arphi or another platform. And then two is build enough trust so that if the team decides to end up using Arphi, they feel like they're working with a partner as opposed to just another customer for another vendor.
Yeah, very cool. And we'll have all the information to find you all in the description. So go look there if you are interested in learning more, but also you can find them on Stargazy as well, which I'm really excited to have you there. So thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Chris.